I received an interesting Omega desk clock today. This one belongs to my brother Denny, from the town of Colville in Washington State. It belonged to his grandfather and is a family heirloom. It's not worked for many years. Nice looking Art Deco style chromed case. Very heavy, most likely brass under this chrome. I would date this to the Roaring '20s. About 1925, give or take a year or two. Let's get it over to the bench and take a closer look at it. This looks like a minute hand. Here's a note from my brother asking me to fix the clock. And another note from a previous clock repair person. He was explaining the condition it was in when he received it. From his drawings, it looks like the cannon pinion post is broke away from the center wheel, and the broken piece is now missing. Denny says I'm at least the third person to look at this clock. All the others in the past weren't able to get it to operate. Real nice, sleek design on the case. I see the back of the case has been boogered up a little bit. Some tool marks from someone who had a tough time removing the back. Never want to use a screwdriver type of tool and twist it to open these, or you end up with butchered tool marks like these. This area here has a recessed slot and is where the makers intended the case to be opened at. The back seam blends in very nice. Unless you're looking for it, you could miss the back actually is separate from the case. The dust cover is missing on the back. You can see a round scratch in the chrome where it was rotated to open it up to adjust the rate of the movement in the past. This hole is where the cover was riveted when new. The fastener screws holding the back to the front bezel have tool marks next to them. Someone has slipped off the screws with their screwdriver and scratched the chrome finish. Some of these tool marks are quite deep. The setting knob is a standard friction fit push-on type with a square mount. I've always liked these brass sweep-styled Omega winding knobs. I'll use this case opener to remove the back. Never twist these openers. Push the opener in firmly and pry straight back until the back releases, and there will be no tool marks left on the case. A nice Omega 15 joule 8-day chronograph movement. These were used in ships, cars, buses, trucks, and aircraft. Very accurate movement. A gentle twist and the balance wheel moves freely. Balance wheel and staff is looking good so far. Here's some foreign material of some sort that doesn't belong here. Almost looks like a chunk of yellowed varnish or glue. I see it's missing one of the case screws on this bridge. These movements had 3 case screws, and there are only 2 here. They're just like a large pocket watch. The case screws need to be released and the movement removed before the dial can be removed from the movement. I'll remove these screws to separate the back from the front bezel. Oh, this one screw is either stripped or too small. The head looks different from the rest of them. See if the back will separate with the screw left in it. It comes apart real nice. That screw couldn't have been doing much good in there. The dial is silvered and heavily tarnished. A few scratches from the hour hand flopping around on it. Here's that screw. Yep, compared to the rest of them, it's too small. I'll need to locate another or modify one to fit. Now to remove the case screws. Oh, well, the dial just fell loose. This isn't good. My guess is someone didn't loosen the case screws and pried the face off. This is probably how the center wheel shaft got broken. All the dial feet have been broke away from the back of the dial. Sad. There's only 2 dial feet left, and they're in the movement. One's missing. Here's the cannon pinion and hour wheel. And this brass mount for the dial foot has some type of adhesive gobbed on it. Maybe after the dial feet were torn out, someone tried to cover their tracks and attempted to glue them back on. This one has glue in it as well. It's going to need to be removed if it's going to be fixed correctly. Just when you think you've seen it all, something like this shows up. It's not even adhered all that good. I see someone signed the back of the dial here. Remove these case screws and the movement will slide out. First, to remove the balance assembly so it doesn't get damaged. Slight pressure on the pallet shows there's still some power in the train. I've seen some people remove the pallet fork without releasing the mainspring power. Not a good practice, a good way to damage the pivots. They weren't designed to spin at a high rate of speed. I'll remove these dial feet. I see the feet are bent. That guy must have really pried on the dial to bend them this much. I don't think they can be reused. In the center wheel shaft that's broken off, actually it's had an attempt to repair it. The end has been filed flat and someone drilled a hole in it, but the hole's mislocated. It's off-centered. The setting wheel spins freely. This minute wheel has a tight spot in it. It's binding on something. It's enough to cause the movement to run slow and possibly stop. I'll keep this in mind and look at this later. I'll let all the power off the mainsprings so I can disassemble it safely. I get this minute wheel work cock off. I see there's some foreign debris chunks here. And the metal has some dings on it here, probably from the dial being loose and the cannon pinion and hour wheel rubbing on it. Now to see if the minute wheel still binds. More dirt. And look at that, it's still binding. Could be some dirt in between the post and the center of the gear. It's going to need to be addressed. I'll take a closer look after it's cleaned. The additional setting wheel, here's some more dirt, the balance cap jewel. You can see the lower half around the screw has a thick layer of oil residue around it, and the cap jewel is completely dry. This usually happens when too much oil is applied. Apply too much oil in these, and the oil ends up creeping away from where it's needed. I see the jewel has a minute crack in it. The pallet cock jewel looks good. Pallet fork jewels and pivots look undamaged. The train wheel bridge jewels look good. Third wheel pivots look good. Escape wheel pivots look good. The pallet fork jewel has a small chip on the face of it. Jewels get chipped like this when tightening the fork with the pivot not in the jewel hole. Get this 3/4 barrel and train wheel bridge removed. The jewel looks good in this. The center wheel. More dirt. Center wheel lower pivot is worn real bad. And here's the off-center hole someone drilled in an attempt to fix. These pivots are in good shape. Mainspring barrels. And here's the model of the movement, 59 8D. The 59 is the diameter of the movement in millimeters. The 8D stands for 8-day movement. More dirt. Let's take a look at the mainsprings. They're the old carbon steel blued type. Now to remove the balance wheel from the balance cock. The jewels look to be in good shape. This movement is dirty and full of lint. I'd say whoever worked on this last had a shop full of lint. Balance pivots and roller jewel look good. Now the cap jewel. It's dry as a board. Been a while since it's been cleaned and oiled. Both jewels look undamaged. The blue finish on the mainsprings look good. As I mentioned before, they're the old, obsolete carbon steel type. They quit making these about 60 years ago. I always recommend installing white alloy springs if they can be found. Back to the dial. The silver finish has some scratches from the hour hand being loose. Most of the silver plating is intact and looks like it can be cleaned up in good shape. The minute track is done in two tones, consisting of silver and brass. Silver has been applied on the numerals, and next to each numeral on the minute track at the 5-minute marks. These are all done by hand back then. The tarnish on the minute track is likely to be pitted, since it's oxidized to brass. The yellowish color on it is most likely yellowed varnish that was applied to protect the brass. Let's get this cannon pinion off. It looks undamaged. The hand that was in the plastic bag is not original to this movement. In fact, it has been reworked. The end has been cut off, as can be seen from the raw brass on the end, and has had a brass center mount glued into it to fit another movement entirely. The hole is too small to fit on the cannon pinion of this clock. And if it were broached to fit the cannon pinion, the brass would mostly be all cut away and weak. The dial feet have been butchered beyond use. The mounting shaft foot is bent. The head where they mount to the back of the dial is deformed. Looks like they have been hammered on. They need to be perfectly flat to make a good tight fit. They mount in the dial same as a rubbed-in jewel. New ones will need to be turned on a lathe. All this glue stuff will all need to be cleaned off, and new dial feet fitted to the dial before this dial can be put into service again. Well, I'll give my findings to Denny and see how he wants to proceed on this Omega 8-day desk clock.